Welcome back to the Warehouse Podcast. I'm Tyler.
I'm Jesse.
And I'm Eli.
And it's been a couple weeks since we've recorded, guys. How are you doing?
Well, I'm doing better because the Orioles are doing better. So they're playing a little bit exciting right now. So that's encouraging. So yeah, no, I'm feeling good. And hopefully we finish the season, kind of strong and don't collapse there. So
okay. Yeah. Do the Orioles typically dictate your mood day to day, Jesse?
They have a large influence on it, but they don't fully dictate it. Yeah.
Okay. And Eli, how are you?
I'm pretty good. I was on some work travel and hence the difficulties with recording. And then I was on some travel and I went and saw Jesse and also feeling good about the O's. We as we're about to say, we're 7-7 since the streak. We've done some things. We've beaten some teams. We are not the last place team in the major leagues anymore.
It's huge.
All that feels good.
Does that feel good? Because I've seen some people are like not happy to be not the worst team in baseball.
Because we want that number one pick.
Yeah. I mean,
they want Elijah Green, I guess.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I can see that, of course, but like it's good to me. Like I think we're going to get somebody who's very, very good with the number 2 pick. I don't think there is a consensus number 1 pick right now. Like in some mock drafts, Elijah Green is going number 2. So yeah, I mean, like right now you can't project out who number 1 is going to be. And I'm enjoying having a little fun with baseball right now. We don't get to do that very often in Baltimore. And yeah, I'm enjoying it.
The thing about it is people have to remember that the number 1 pick comes at a heavy cost of being the worst Major League Baseball team for an entire season. And that is not fun. So I think people have to remember that. And also, even if the Orioles had the number 1 pick, would we really pick the number 1 pick? We would probably pick the number 7 pick and save a little money here. And, so.
Well, but then at least we'd have an extra $1 million for the high schooler we're going to take in the 4th round.
Right. But that would be a lot more disappointing probably to Oriole fans is that, they don't get the pick they want. And then more so than we just don't get the number 1 pick at all.
But people have twisted themselves in knots a little bit there saying, well, the number 1 pick also comes with the biggest like signing bonus pool amount, typically, not always, but in the Orioles case, it would because they get all the competitive balance picks and stuff. They qualify for all that usually. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I enjoy watching my baseball team play good baseball. And like the last couple of weeks, they've been a 500 team. That's much more fun to watch than what we had been watching, especially in August, which was like an utter disaster. And yeah, I mean, to your point, Eli, about like, there's not really a consensus number 1 pick. Like Elijah Green is 17 years old, 16 years old right now. Yeah. Like a year from now, that's like more than 10% of his entire life is a year from now. Like he could be a totally different person in a year. So I'd rather just have fun. We're going to get one of the top 2 picks anyway. So play some good baseball, and they've won 44 games now. So they can't be as bad as the 2003 Tigers, who were like the worst team of the century. So
it's a big win. Yeah,
that's huge. That's huge. So yeah, I'm excited about it.
We were in jeopardy of hitting that for a while, so it's good we're not.
Yeah, well, I mean, they entered the month probably needing like 5 or 6 wins to do that or something like that, and maybe not that many, but they needed a few, and after August, that seemed like a stretch. So I feel good about that.
5 wins in a month seemed like a stretch.
It did. It absolutely did. But yeah, I mean, nothing like major, no real independent events have happened these last couple of weeks. So we're just kind of gonna go through the gambit of all the stuff that has happened in Birdland over the last couple of weeks, hit on a few of the hot button issues, and kind of just roll with it. So Eli has lovingly put together an outline for us, which we appreciate, Eli. Thank you for that. Jesse,
you are so welcome.
Did you make any contributions to this, Jesse?
I think I changed the outline date at the top from 9/8 to 9/9.
Oh my god,
that's huge. Yeah.
Oh my god,
we were planning to record last night and then we didn't, so I made the proper adjustment.
Thank you. Always on top of things.
Tyler had some daddy duties.
I did. I had gotten the kid to sleep right before we got on. It was perfect. And then as we started, like almost right before we started to record, he woke up and was very interested in being involved, and that was problematic.
Just a note for the listeners: you've never seen a baby so fascinated with a mic, with a camera, with any of the setup. He just was looking at himself on the Zoom call, just smiling away, talking to himself.
Yeah, he loves looking at himself. That's most, even if it doesn't have to be like FaceTime or a video, he can like look at old pictures of himself and he just loves it. So he's a little bit vain, but we'll work on that. He's only 13 months old. We have time.
Right.
All right. Well, let's jump into some pitching stuff, because that's kind of been like the realm of most change these past couple of weeks, and a lot of things have happened. So first up, and Eli, maybe you want to touch on how excited you are about this, but Connor Green's back in the fold and looks like pretty good. I mean, are we expecting anything else from Connor Green? Is he like a part of the future Orioles bullpen, or is this just kind of another like, patchwork move? Let's just get us through the season and then we'll figure things out after that.
I think it's kind of the same thing we've been saying all year. Like, Connor Green is an upside play, and thus far in this turn through the bullpen with us, he seems like he's had a little bit better control, and it's been pretty effective. So if he keeps this up, he's still a pre-arb guy. There's absolutely no reason why he's not in the Orioles bullpen next year.
Yeah, and I think he's got an option left, and the Dodgers liked him enough to keep him on their 40-man for a little bit. So there's something there. Jesse, any thoughts about Connor Green?
Yeah, no. I mean, I like him a lot. I think that most likely he's going to be, like Eli said, on the team next year. I don't see really what would stop that from happening, unless some sort of catastrophe for him. But no, I mean, I think he looks good as far as being on the next good Orioles team. I mean, I think that's a leap.
Mm-hmm.
But he's a middle reliever type guy. He's definitely if he pitches really well, he of course could be a potential trade chip, just because we're probably not going to hold him for 3 years, especially if he's really good, until we're competitive. So 2 or 3 years, or whenever that date is. So
yeah,
you always say that the bullpen guys are the most volatile. And if we have some immediate success with him, he could be flipped. So,
yeah, I mean, kind of speaking on the volatility a little bit, Paul Fry is like a great example of that. This was a guy that last season was really good. Most of this season had been pretty good, was like a legitimate trade chip a month and a half ago.
He'd been pretty good through 2019 too.
Yeah, true.
I mean, this was like years running. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I think we talked very early this season when he had some struggles in April, like what was going on there. He definitely figured it out, was really good, but now he's gone down to AAA. He's kind of struggled in AAA still. I think Jim Palmer said on a broadcast that he kind of thinks Fry might be one of the sticky stuff guys. Like, he's lost a lot of effectiveness since that went into play. I don't really know what to make. I don't know enough there to make any sort of determination. I would trust Jim Palmer's thoughts on that sort of stuff. But I don't know, Jesse, do you see, like, is Paul Fry permanently broken? Is there anything to, fix there? Or, do you have any thoughts on Paul Fry's future with the Orioles or even in Major League Baseball?
I mean, I think the thing for me is this is a veteran pitcher. I think he's been through these sorts of struggles before, like we talked about at the beginning of the season. He was absolutely horrendous. And I'm sure we had a discussion somewhat similar to this at the time, and he figured it out. So I think he's a veteran. I think he's just one of these guys. He doesn't throw very hard. So I think every once in a while he's going to hit one of these rough stretches where he gets hit around a bit, and doesn't have as sharp a command as he really needs to have in order to be effective. So no, I'm not terribly worried. It's annoying that he had to get optioned, but I don't think it's the end of the world. And we have a whole off season coming up. We have all of spring training, and I think there's plenty of time for him and the people around him to try to get him straightened out. So I'm not overly worried about it, but it does say something, I think, a little bit, having gone through these stretches. I do think these kinds of things might be warning signs to potential buyers of him, because when he's bad, he just implodes, and it seemingly can happen at any moment. So is that, is that a guy that a team is going to trade a lot of their top prospects for? I don't know, somebody that could hit a bad stretch at any moment, and not only be, what you need them to be, but be a serious liability in the bullpen.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point about. I wonder if he's really even sellable over the winter. I mean, I'm sure somebody would take him for a bag of balls, but is it really worth the Orioles to do that? I don't know, Eli, if you have any thoughts on maybe his trade value, or even just sort of the struggles you're seeing out of Paul Fry.
Yeah, I actually, as I was putting this outline together, and I like typed up some of his stats, he's like given up 17 earned runs in 7 innings. He's struck out 4 people and walked 16 in August. So, it was like really genuinely atrocious. And I kind of went and I did that same deep dive, and, July, like a lot of his spin rate numbers were just the same. He was really locked in. He was doing a great job. I think this is like purely a matter of somebody getting the yips. Like he genuinely is having a harder time throwing strikes. As Jesse said, like he's in the 41st percentile in fastball velocity. He's not the kind of guy who's going to blow somebody away, and he's not the kind of guy who can make mistakes. And traditionally, he has been able to work around that. He's been able to work with the stuff he has. His slider actually has a pretty solid spin rate on it and has been a super effective pitch. But that being said, people are just going to sit on the fastball and tee off on that because he has no idea where it's going. I don't know. It's kind of like, we saw, I don't know if anyone was watching that Rays game, but Tanner Scott came in and threw like 16 straight sliders. Mm-hmm. Because when you get wild, you just have to kind of rely on your best pitch. When you rely on your best pitch, they ignore your best pitch. And it's as simple as that. So, yeah, I mean, this is definitely concerning, but like Jesse said, we've seen him go through struggles before. I think the largest concern, just like Jesse said, is with trade value. I mean, this totally, there were struggles at the beginning of the year that he was able to work through and stay on the big league team for the next 5 months. This, he's somebody that's supposed to be a top line guy, and he's now in AAA finishing out the season. So yeah, I can't see anybody giving up anything for him. And luckily for us, he still has 3 years of control. So might as well, just hang on to him this offseason. Hope he picks it back up next year, becomes the guy he is. And then you sell him with 2.5 years. You sell him with 2 years of control.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also a good argument for maybe sell those relief guys when they are hot. Like there's right. No Jesse's got his eyes real big right now. I mean, there's definitely a class of reliever that maybe you don't want to do that with, but I think the vast majority, if they're hot and there's people interested and the return is even somewhat interesting, that trigger finger's got to get a little itchy, I think. Sticking in the bullpen, let's talk Jorge Lopez. Obviously, he's been a starter for most of the year. He's moved out to the bullpen recently, has looked pretty good in a couple of outings there, but does have a sprained ankle. It's apparently a pretty serious sprain, and it's looking like he's going to be out for the rest of the year. Something interesting about Lopez, though, is that he is arbitration eligible for the first time this offseason. Now, arbitration could get all weird this year with the collective bargaining agreement being renegotiated, all that stuff. But if things stay similar to where they are right now, because that's all we really know is the current system, Lopez is a case where should the Orioles tender him a contract, not only is there the injury concerns, but there's what role does he really have on this team? Is he a starter? Is he a reliever? And regardless of that, how much value is he to the team? So Eli, maybe I'll go to you first. What do you think the outcome will be for Lopez this offseason? Is he going to be tendered a contract? And maybe what sort of role do you see him playing for the Orioles in 2022?
This is a super tough situation, and it's kind of why I threw it on here. I think the one thing that Jorge Lopez, and this is really ironic, but I think the thing that he has going for him is that he was really bad this year. And, the raise that he's going to get in arbitration is not one that's going to be significant in any way, shape, or form. Like, obviously assuming the current system stays in place, like there's a chance he makes $1 million.
Yeah.
Like maybe 1.1, but for a legitimate bullpen arm, which he could become, that's a pretty solid price. And I think, the Orioles obviously like his stuff. There's a reason he's been on the team all year. There's a reason, he hasn't been given the runaround, sent through, DFA'd, waivers, et cetera, and, just like had a Chris Ellis come and replace him. There's a reason he hasn't been that guy. He's been the guy that the Orioles have tried to make it work. So I think the fact that he hasn't been very good and thus his raise will not be very high probably bodes well for him. And I think the Orioles give him an extended look next year in the pen.
Yeah, I tend to be on that same wavelength. I mean, look at some of the contracts the Orioles handed out last year. They tendered Pat Valaika. That obviously was a disaster, but it made sense at the time. I think they tendered Yolmer Sanchez and then ended up cutting him in spring training. So yeah, and I would agree. $1 million sounds about right. Jesse, are you having similar thoughts?
No, I think so. I mean, I think that the question that we're asking right now, like, should the Orioles tender him a contract? That's why it would have been nice to have seen him for a longer period of time in the bullpen, right? Maybe, okay, we gave him a chance as a starter. We didn't exactly know how he would perform. Maybe we thought he could have taken a step forward in the rotation. He obviously, at this current moment is not a starting pitcher. So it would have been nice to have given him, a few months in the bullpen to figure out what we were doing with him in the off season, because there is a chance that he just comes back next year, is not effective in the bullpen at all. I mean, he's not the most consistent pitcher, right? So there is a possibility of him just kind of imploding sort of at any moment. So it would have been nice to have seen him in the bullpen, to see him get some sort of stability. And he was off to a great, we've talked about it. He was off to a great start in the bullpen. He looked very, very effective.
Except for his last outing.
Yeah. And the outing he got injured.
No, the one before.
Oh, the one before. Okay, yeah. Yeah, he had
run.
Right. So, but he looked good in the bullpen. So it would have been nice to have seen a couple months of him pitching in the bullpen rather than 3 or 4 or 5 relief appearances that he got. So,
yeah, and I think $1 million is worth seeing a guy like Jorge Lopez pitch in the bullpen for a full season. I mean, talent is expensive, especially a 29-year-old with major league experience. So yeah, I mean, give him the contract. You can even see him in spring, and I think we talked about this with Yolmer Sanchez. If they cut him before the end of spring, then you don't owe him the money anyway. So yeah, give him the tender in the contract, see what he can do in Sarasota, and go from there. But I don't think $1 million, which I know we're kind of speculating, but I do think that sounds like a fair price. $1 million is not that much to pay for what could be a reliable bullpen arm.
And Mike Elias went and got Jorge Lopez, so I think that he definitely likes him too. So I think the odds are he'll be here next year.
Yeah, that sounds right. All right, the big news of the week, I said there wasn't really any huge individual stories, but I think this probably qualifies as that, is that Mike Baumann, one of the Orioles' top pitching prospects, typically looked at as the number 3 prospect pitching-wise behind Grayson Rodriguez and DL Hall, although Kyle Bradish has kind of unseated him there, but still you can consider Mike Baumann one of the best pitching prospects in the Orioles system. He made his major league debut this year. He came in as a reliever through 3 2/3 innings, allowed 1 unearned run, struck out 1, 2 hits, 1 walk, and got the win in his major league debut. It sounds like Brandon Hyde is going to stick with him as a long relief pitcher for the time being. Not sure I love that, but I get that they're kind of trying to protect him from injury. I know Bauman's kind of been my guy for a little while. He's one of like the non-top 100 guys prior to the season that I was really excited to see. Eli, I think you've been excited about him too. So maybe I'll go to you, what's the word I'm looking for? Our resident pitching expert, to maybe give you a breakdown of what you saw from Baumann in his debut.
Yeah, the first thing I want to throw out is that I feel like there was a really good line to introduce this topic. Something about like the big news of the week was Big Mike making his big league debut. It was just
with the big hair.
Yeah. And the big hair, big smile. I don't know. I thought like something was there. Yeah,
we didn't talk about that. I guess that we should.
We didn't. I know. We should have prepared.
We should.
But yeah, no, I thought Bauman looked really good. You know, the one thing that is kind of interesting is people talk about the big stuff and talk about him as a strikeout guy. You know, this is a Royals team that, like, they have a couple folks who strike out a ton, a couple who don't strike out that often. But, you know, only seeing him rack up 1K was just kind of interesting to me because it's not the type of pitcher you usually look at him as. But that being said, like, regardless of all that, you know, he was sitting mid 90s. He's got that slider cutter thing. Ben McDonald and Kevin Brown had no idea what to call it. You know, that comes in at like 90, 91. It's a super hard slider, but it like behaves more like a cutter. And he's like got a curveball and a changeup, doesn't really use them. They're not that effective. He's really, you know, they talk about him as a 2-pitch pitcher. But he did flip in a couple curveballs, if I remember right. All that aside, I really liked what I saw. I mean, like, he came in, you know, he was confident. His velocity sat steady through, you know, 3 2/3. Like Tyler said, only the 2 hits, only 1 walk. He was really effective. And I thought that, you know, he was letting his fastball eat at the top of the zone, which, you know, as somebody who's as like tall as he is and throws as hard as he does with as effective as a fastball as he has, that's what you need to do. You need to live at the top of the zone. He got it, you know, he got in on the hands of a couple people. And I think this is exactly what you wanted to see out of him. And I'm excited. I do think that the pen is probably the right move for him now, as much as, you know, my inner pitching fan wants to see him in the rotation, let him go, try to get through 7 innings against a major league lineup. Like, it's realistic. The dude has been hurt a ton. And this is extending the season for him longer than he would, you know, than he would have had in AAA, longer than he would have had anywhere. So I get keeping him in the pen, give him a couple of 3-4 inning outings, you know, let him be a long man, maybe even like give him an inning as a high leverage guy. Tyler Wells was a starting pitcher in the minors, and we've given him a high leverage role. So let him play around, let him see how his stuff works in the big leagues, let him try to figure out how to get big league hitters out without the pressure of having to get through a lineup 3 times. I like him right here.
Okay, Jesse, I mean, you can kind of talk on whatever you'd like to with Bauman, but I think that's an interesting kind of dynamic, is the role he's in currently, what your thoughts are there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fine. I think it's definitely not ideal just because of the unpredictability of when you need a long man available. I guess it is a little better than a normal bullpen pitcher, because if, you know, at least he's going to have certain days on his calendar where he knows he's not going to be pitching. If you throw 3 innings on a given day, you know, you're not going to pitch the next day. So there is some benefit to that, but yeah, I don't know, as far as from a stability perspective, from a getting him comfortable perspective, I'm not sure it's great conditions for him to be pitching in all the time, but it is sort of, there is a comfortable point to it where he could just kind of come in, sort of relax. There's not the pressure of being the starting pitcher on him. If he comes in and it's 5-0, he's not coming in, you know, feeling like he's got to get every single out. If he gives up a couple runs, not the end of the world, etc. So I think there are pros and cons to it. But I don't think it's a bad decision to have him be the long man by any stretch. And then, like Eli said, yeah, have him go pitch in the 8th inning one day or a couple days, right? Coming in with a 3-run lead or something, and see how it goes, right? You could kind of there's some flexibility where you could kind of experiment and see how he works. The one thing that's kind of interesting about it is he wasn't one of the September call-ups. That was what was kind of interesting to me. And, you know, without the injury to Lopez, you know, would we have been seeing him, or would another move later have been required in order for him to get caught up at all? I kind of wonder from the Orioles perspective, you know, how much was this need and how much were they like really determined to get him up to see what he can do at the major league level. And that's kind of what I'm a little bit curious about, just because he seemed like the guy that the Orioles, it made perfect sense for him to come up to the bigs, have his little trial session for a month, see how it goes, and then we could kind of reevaluate where he belongs moving into next year. But it kind of seemed like I don't know how much the Orioles actually made this move just out of need, and how, or is it really because they really wanted to give him a chance and see what he could do? So I'm not sure.
I mean, it could be a little bit of both. So his last start for Norfolk was actually on August 31st. So he wouldn't have been a prime candidate to come up and start like September 2nd or something like that. So I'm sure they wanted him to be on full rest. Plus, there's travel involved there. I'm sure there's a ton of like paperwork and things you have to sign. I would imagine when you become a Major League Baseball player, I don't know if there's union stuff involved. Like, there's the bureaucratic part of it and the HR part of it that we're probably not privy to that is a little more involved. But he was I think he was the last pitcher on the 40-man roster that hadn't been called up at some point this year. And I do think that, as one of the Orioles' better prospects, I don't think he's a guy you just call up because you say, oh, well, we need an arm. So like, let's just bring him up for 2 weeks. Like you would do that with Spencer Watkins or Dustin Knight or one of those guys. It's like, look, we obviously care about you as a person, but like in terms of putting you in the best position to succeed, that's not our top concern. I think with Baumann, you probably would be a little more concerned. So I think it was probably in the plan, like, let's get him up here. It seems like they're going to keep him in the long relief role for a bit, maybe get him a start at the end. That's kind of like an old school approach. Like I think Jim Palmer did that back in the day, was like a reliever for a lot of his rookie year and then was a starter the next year. But yeah, I think it was probably a planned thing. I sure would hope it is with a prospect who is universally regarded as a pretty good pitching prospect. I would hope there was a plan there versus just like an emergency break was pulled,
Yeah. The other thing I'll say about that is there was, Baumann was one of two guys to come up, and Manny Barreda also came up while Jorge Lopez hit the IL and Zach Birdie was optioned to Norfolk. So, if one was the planned with Birdie going to Norfolk and one was called up because Jorge Lopez hit the IL, I think it's probably Manny Barreda was called up because Lopez hit the IL.
Yeah.
That being said, I saw Zach Birdie's name and I remember us claiming him off waivers, and I had a brain blast. In the mid 2010s, he was like the greatest college closer ever. He was touching triple digits at Louisville, and his brother was also a pitcher, Nick Birdie, I think, or something like that.
Yeah,
but
Nick Birdie.
Yeah, that just blew my mind. And he was like taken in the first round as a relief prospect, which almost never happens. You take starting prospects and then if they can't cut it, you move them to a relief role. He was a relief pitcher. That was what he did. He was touching triple digits, and I think it was the White Sox, whoever took him in the first round. So kind of cool to have him here. I don't know if he's going to be any good.
Gosman drafted as a closer too? Wasn't he closing for LSU or something?
No, he was a starter.
I know Matt Wieters was Georgia Tech's closer back in the day, and he was the starting.
He would catch 8 innings and then go jump on the mound and chuck 96.
Yeah. Don't bring up Kevin Gausman. Okay, he was my favorite, and he sucked. He didn't suck. He just like was never great, and now he's with the Giants, and he's pretty good. Although
he was mediocre for us the entire time.
But he's another one they brought up as like a reliever for a while, and was like a good reliever in that 2014 team, but never quite figured it out as a starter. Was decent, I would say,
until he left the Orioles.
Well, but then the Braves had issues with him.
That's
the
true.
Reds had issues with him, so like it wasn't right away.
Yeah, but the talent was in him the whole time.
Oh yeah, he's got huge talent,
and we all knew that.
Yeah. Speaking of somebody else who once had huge talent, Matt Harvey.
What a segue.
Sorry, Matt. He pitched last night. We're recording this on Wednesday the 9th. Thursday the 9th. He pitched on Wednesday the 8th. Struggled a little bit. Well, no, he pitched. Didn't he pitch pretty well? Did he pitch last night?
Pretty good.
He pitched pretty well. But he has now gotten hurt, and he is on the 10-day IL with right knee inflammation. Brandon Hyde said that apparently it has been kind of a start-to-start thing with Harvey, that he's been suffering with some knee problems, and they ultimately made the decision earlier today to put him on the IL. So this kind of got, I think I saw a couple people on Twitter talking about it, and then I figured let's talk about it on here. Do you think that that is potentially Matt Harvey's final start in an Orioles uniform? I mean, I think it's reasonable enough to say it's his last start in an Orioles uniform this year, but could it be his last start in an Orioles uniform ever, Jesse?
Well, let me just say real quick.
Please do.
Yeah, let me just say that he did not pitch well last night. He went 4 1/3, gave up 4 runs, 3 earned, and he gave up 9 hits. So he did not pitch very well.
So it was only it was only 2 runs until that 5th inning.
Okay.
So he collapsed.
He gave up 9 hits though. 9 hits.
I mean, look.
Okay, well, clearly a couple of those were in the inning where he gave up 2 extra runs in the 5th.
Would any of us done any better? So
correct. Yeah.
There's actually an argument to be made.
I don't know.
I'm joking.
But anyway, Jesse, the question is
right. I just wanted to clarify, but yeah.
We're all about facts here on the Warehouse Podcast. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. I have no idea whether that was Harvey's last start for the Orioles. I think there is an outside chance that he does get brought back next year for the Orioles.
Yeah.
That would not surprise me at all. It seems like it would be a Mike Elias move. And the market for Matt Harvey cannot be, off the hook this summer or this winter. So I think that there's a very good chance that he's the perfect kind of guy. He showed some glimmers where he could be a consistent starting pitcher for the Orioles. He's gonna demand a very cheap contract for the Orioles. I could definitely.
He's going to demand a very cheap contract.
Right. Yeah, kind of an oxymoron. Yeah,
I have to get a cheap contract.
Yeah, right. No, he's going to require not a lot of money for the Orioles organization. So he seems like the perfect fit to return next year. So
I could see that. I think that's possible. His FIP this year is only 4.60. So like it's a run and a half lower than what his ERA is. So I don't know. It's possible. Eli, you were shaking your head no pretty ferociously there when Jesse was saying that. So you have an opposite opinion?
I think it's accentuated by the big headphones. Just as I move, they wiggle a little bit.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I mean, I can't say it's his last start in an Orioles uniform, but what I can say is that whether it's his last start in an Orioles uniform and whether or not he comes back this year from injury, I have the same answer. Like, I don't think he comes back next year. I think that, the Orioles are going to make like the just barely slightly upside plays. And, some starting pitchers, like, I think that Matt Harvey, if he comes back next year, there's a 0% chance his ERA is below a 5.5. And that's not to say he wouldn't be cheap. That's not to say he wouldn't be usable for the Orioles. But that is to say that he's not going to be a deadline, like a potential trade chip at the deadline.
Right.
And because of that, I think that, the Orioles aren't going to make upside plays, but they're going to make plays to get somebody who could potentially be valuable and could be backfilled by some of our younger, like quadruple A guys. So yeah, I just don't see Harvey returning. Yes, he had the nice, like 20 plus scoreless inning streak. He started off coming out of the All-Star break really hot. It sounds like this knee has been bothering him for a while, so that might be indicative of some better things to come. But the Orioles have absolutely no reason to bank on that. The Orioles have just no real reason to sign him, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I could see him being like a free or a spring training invite kind of guy. I mean, yeah, he's not going to get, which is what he was this year. I think it was spring training invite, and if you make the team, you get $1 million or something like that. I could see it being something like that again. But yeah, I mean, you're right. There's probably going to be a few veteran guys that are sort of reclamation projects out there this winter, and maybe the Orioles say like, all right, well, we couldn't really make it happen with Harvey, but he gave us like 130 good innings, which was beneficial. Let's go find another guy that maybe will sign for $500K or something, and we can try it again. Because yeah, I mean, there's going to be enough innings going around that I don't know, that you could hope that Alex Wells and Dean Kramer and Mike Baumann and Keegan Aiken, who's looked better recently, can like take those innings that Matt Harvey had this year. But I don't know. I think it's totally realistic that he would sign a minor league free agent deal. And, you know, we didn't necessarily think he was going to make the team this spring either. And he did.
As the number 2 starter.
As the number 2 starter.
Right.
And has been the only member of the rotation that's been in the rotation all year. I mean, Means had the lengthy IL stint. Zimmerman's been on the IL for forever. Like, Harvey is literally the only constant. I think he missed a couple starts there, but in general, he's been there. And I don't know. Is that worth another $1 million? I don't know. I'll say sure. I'll say sure. They sign him again for another cheap contract and he pitches, but maybe gets cut sometime during the year next year. So I'll say no, it's not his last start as an Oriole.
Is Matt Harvey about to become the next Wade LeBlanc?
Well,
is that what you're arguing?
I would rather have Matt Harvey, I think, than Wade LeBlanc. Although hasn't Wade LeBlanc been kind of good for the Cardinals this year?
Oh, absolutely, he has.
I think what also we have to kind of keep in mind is that, yeah, obviously Matt Harvey did not have a very good year this year in comparison to other starting pitchers in the major leagues, but relative to where he's been, given his injuries, this was actually a big step forward for Matt Harvey in his career.
Yeah.
And I'm not convinced the Orioles wouldn't think that he couldn't take another step forward next year and maybe be a trade chip halfway through the year. So I think we're being, you know, obviously the numbers were not great. You know, nobody disputes that. Matt Harvey doesn't dispute that. But relative to where he's been the past few years, I think he should be proud of this season. And maybe it's one he can build on, trying to kind of reinvent himself as a veteran pitcher in Major League Baseball.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I wouldn't mind having him back. If we were like an 80-win team this year and trying to be a playoff team next year, I wouldn't be happy about it. But what are the Orioles trying to be next year? A 70-win team? Like, I'd be fine with Matt Harvey being on that team.
I mean, what do we have to lose by having him? I mean,
yeah, I agree with that. But one thing I will say is that I think, you know, this year, like the Dean Kramers, the Keegan Aikens, Alexander Wells, all those guys not coming up and not being in the rotation pretty much every turn through, that was like okay because they were still pretty young. Mm-hmm. I think next year is the year that we really find out. I mean, I think we can't protect these guys in the minors anymore. And I think you need to have starts available for all of those guys. And I think the only way that happens, you know, I think we need to sign 1 or 2 veterans for sure to stabilize the rotation. But I think the only way that happens is if you have 2 of those guys making a start through every turn of the rotation.
Yeah. I mean, I think you would. That's fair. That's fair.
Like, to me, if Dean Kramer is in AAA next year, he's not worth keeping around. We should cut him.
Yeah.
You know, at that point, like, this is like the year that the development should be pushing them over the top and into the big leagues. And like, that's not to say people can't keep developing in the big leagues, but that is to say, like, they need to be crossing this threshold about at this time if they're going to become this person.
Right, because then you kind of get into like what, you know, Mike Wright, Tyler Wilson, David Hess kind of territory where they're like, they just bounce back and forth and make spot starts. Because, I mean, if they can't hack it in the rotation, I think that a lot of them are guys that you would try in the bullpen. You would try a Keegan Aiken in the bullpen, a Dean Kramer in the bullpen, maybe not an Alex Wells. Like, he doesn't really have that skill set, but like, I don't know. Yeah, you're right. And I would love to see Ballman in the rotation every 5th day. I also don't think it's totally ridiculous to see the Orioles maybe with like a 6-man rotation and you try to give the guys like an extra day of rest or whatever. I know that's easier said than done, but
particularly with someone like Bauman, though, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Just because of the injury history.
Yeah. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. I mean, I think that, they need to sign a guy to stabilize the rotation. And I still don't think it's unrealistic that Harvey could maybe be one of those guys that's at least there in spring training. And if injuries happen, he could sneak into the regular season rotation too.
That's fair.
Yeah, he might accept a AAA assignment too. I mean, with where he's at. Maybe.
If he's getting paid a good amount, maybe.
Right.
All right, sticking on the Harvey train, we're going to talk Hunter Harvey real quick. He has now been transitioned to the 60-day IL. He's been on the IL, I think, since June, the end of June. That sounds right to me.
Yeah.
He's had some shoulder stuff, I believe, and has been on a minor league rehab stint for close to a month now, and it's not going particularly well. So he's on the 60-day, and Eli has asked us in this outline to put on our front office hat. I've never seen Michael Elias wear a hat, but maybe. Oh wait, he wears a baseball cap sometimes.
He does.
Is Harvey going to be Matt Harvey, or not Matt Harvey, Hunter Harvey, going to be a factor in your future plans for the Orioles? Eli, since you posed this question, maybe I'll go to you first here.
Yeah, I think the answer is no for me. Like,
wow.
Yeah, it's a harsh reality, but I think we have folks coming through the system that are going to need 40-man spots. And if you can't count on him for even 30 innings in a year, then what's he doing taking up that spot? Mm-hmm. The guy clearly has good stuff. He clearly has a big fastball. The curveball plays, but how long can you hold out hope? This guy was like what was he, the 2013 first round pick?
Yep.
Yeah,
exactly.
So, I mean, he's been around, and this has been the problem the entire time. So yeah, I put this up because I'm losing faith, and I think that obviously keep him on the 40-man this year through the winter, because I don't think there are too many people knocking on that door. But as soon as as next year breaks, like, you should evaluate him and potentially try to pass him through waivers or something if he's not healthy.
Yeah, I mean, I think this starts to feel a lot like the Chris Davis conversation a little bit, just obviously with different stakes, because it's not a salary. It's more of just like the talent you're carrying around.
Right.
And, we talked for years about, like, is this year that they give up on Chris Davis? And it really didn't happen until they absolutely kind of had to, because injuries. And obviously Harvey's had some injuries too. But I think with what the conversation becomes, like, is he blocking somebody more talented than him, or somebody that makes the Orioles a better team in terms of getting them closer to the playoff picture? And I feel like that's not going to happen next year at any time. I don't see Hunter Harvey blocking anybody that makes the Orioles from a pretender to a contender anytime in 2022. Maybe that happens in 2023, although I still have some doubts there. But I think that I would certainly have him on the team all of next year too. And then maybe in the offseason of 2023, things get a little tougher.
Yeah.
Jesse, where's your head at?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, the Orioles, I think, are going to try to keep him, kind of like you're saying, because he is very talented, and they just imagine if we can just get him healthy, he could be a very productive. I mean, at this point, he could be a very productive major league pitcher for us if he's healthy, right? I mean, I think he's basically proven that. It's just a question of whether he can be healthy or not. So, I mean, I think the Orioles kind of try to make every attempt to keep him around and get him straight. At the end of the day, he is very talented, but there does eventually come a time where you have to part ways. But I don't think we're close to that quite yet. Kind of like you're saying, Tyler. I think the bullpen is flexible enough where if he was a starting first baseman, I think it'd be a lot more difficult. Or if but given the fact that he's in the bullpen, I think it's an easier job to kind of keep him around.
Yeah. Now, Eli, it looked like you wanted to jump in before I passed it to Jesse. Did you have another point you wanted to make? It's okay.
Yeah, honestly, it's gone.
The one thing I would say about it, though, the one thing I'd say, though, is I think at this point the Orioles can't start. They have to kind of like move on in the sense of like where their head is at. Like anything Matt Harvey provides us is going to be a bonus, is going to be extra, right. But we cannot rely on him to be there in the future.
Yeah, he can't be the closer of the future anymore. I totally
he
agree.
Can't be penciled in for that. Right.
Yeah, I guess that's more what I was trying to get at, is that, like, if I didn't make it clear, I was saying the exact same thing as Tyler, that like 2023 is the year that he should he will become dead weight to me. Mm-hmm. Like this year, it cost us absolutely nothing to keep him around through the duration of 22. but there will be a point like, and because there is the potential upside, like you bank on nothing, you assume you're getting nothing for him. He takes up a 40-man spot, but we have that spot available. And like Jesse said, whatever you get from him is gravy next year.
Yep. Somebody that has actually outplayed expectations is Ramon Urias. He has, I don't even know all of his numbers, but he's been pretty good this year. He's got an OPS of 773. He's played a decent shortstop and second base. He's had some injury concerns this past week. I guess we just wanted to mention on here is sort of like the news that's happened these last couple of weeks, but I don't know. Do you guys want to say anything good about Ramon Arias while we're talking? Because he's one of like my bright spots of the entire summer.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, I threw him on here just to point out. I think it was, earlier in August, he had been placed on the IL with like this upper leg. I think it's his quad. With some tightness for that, and this is apparently the same nagging injury. He's just come back, but yeah, I mean, this dude's been a performer ever since he got the opportunity, and this was somebody that I was looking at and was not excited about in the least. Every time there was a decision as to who should come up and be the utility guy, I was thinking Pat Valaika, even through all the time that Pat Valaika was really bad.
Yeah.
And so like Urias has come out of nowhere, and I think he's been brilliant. And I think he's like, quite frankly, earned himself, not necessarily earned the starting job for next year, but earned himself the position of the front runner for it.
At second base?
No, shortstop.
Shortstop. Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Because I mean, yeah, that is, I was thinking of him for second base, but I can see where you're coming, because I would almost prefer like they go get another guy like a Freddie Galvis or an Iglesias for shortstop, but
I wouldn't hate that. Yeah. If he's playing second base, I'm totally happy. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, and I know they want to get Mateo in there too, but
right.
And where does that leave Jahmai Jones?
I mean,
that's the question.
I mean, he's not hitting right now, but if Urias is at second, then Jahmai Jones isn't getting consistent playing time there.
Right. I mean, I want to see Jahmai Jones play some baseball, but Urias is, I think, has been as much of a prospect as Jahmai Jones. Like we can't get it twisted that Jahmai Jones was some like can't miss top 100 kind of guy. Like he was a guy that was playing second base in the minors and was better than what the Orioles had at second base when it was Rio Ruiz and Pat Valaika. But now that, we've got other options. Yeah, I want to see Jahmai Jones play, but I'm not like going to do anything it takes to make Jahmai Jones like the everyday starter at second base. You know what I mean? Jesse, anything else on Urias you want to touch on?
I think it's been really exciting to see. I mean, he's a dynamic player, and even defensively at short, he definitely holds his own over there. So I think that's really encouraging too, because he can be kind of, even if he doesn't start, he could be a utility infielder. I mean, I think he should, like Eli said, be the front runner to start somewhere on the infield, either short or second. So yeah, I mean, the question mark is, do you want Mateo at short and you put Urias at second, right? That's kind of
third base is kind of a black hole. Like I have no idea who's going to start at third base next year.
Right, exactly. And
when I was saying that, the way that I had envisioned it was a like Jahmai Jones at third, Mateo at second, and Urias at short. Of the in-house candidates, that's how I was seeing it.
Right, that's kind of an interesting configuration. I mean, you could swap some of them around, and it would still make sense. That's kind of what's nice about our middle infield right now, is that they are flexible. Mateo plays everywhere. Urias can play second, short, and third, right? And Jahmai Jones, of course, is flexible too. So. No, I mean, I think that's a really great thing about the infield. Yeah, I would. Those three guys, I would like to see at least all three of them get a substantial amount of playing time next year, throughout the course of the season. So, yeah.
Yeah. Somebody else.
Tyler, real quick.
Oh, yeah.
Tyler, real quick. I also want to throw out Jahmai Jones was a former top 100 prospect.
Oh, was he? Okay. Well, he hasn't been for a couple of years, though.
It's been a couple of years, but he. I don't know. It's kind of in the same ballpark as Mateo. Like he had that kind of elite level prospect status, and then has had a rough couple of years.
And I know like Keith Law, I think really liked Jahmai Jones. So, and Keith Law, mixed bag as with any prospect analyst, but he also really liked Jonathan Scope back in the day when other people weren't as high on Jonathan Scope. So like Keith Law does have his, the times he hits and he hits big. So that is worth something. Somebody else that's been really good has been Tyler Wells. Love the first name and love the stuff on the mound. He's kind of the Orioles closer right now. I mean, I don't know, like, is that the role he's going to have going forward? He seems like he's got like the mental fortitude for it. He always seems super pumped up at the end of the games. Eli, is Tyler Wells kind of the Orioles closer for at least 2022?
Yeah, this is a super interesting question because the dude throws 5 pitches. Mm-hmm. He's not the prototypical closer, but he's also 6'8" and can touch 98 miles an hour. So, he's like clearly got, as you said, the closer mentality, the closer stuff. And I don't know, it's a super interesting question as to whether the Orioles start playing around with that. To me, I say you stretch him out over the winter. Like in the minors, he was a starter. Uh-huh. I actually said that earlier on this podcast. I just realized. But yeah, he was a minor league starter, and he clearly, kind of has the repertoire to make all that happen. If that 98 tones back down to 94, that doesn't hurt anything. He's got a good fastball. It's got like some above average rise on it. I think the dude's a stud. So I say you stretch him out over the course of this winter. You bring him into spring training, see how he likes it. I think he should get a start or two at the beginning of next year and see what's going on. If nothing works out, throw him right back in the 9th inning and I'll be totally happy.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I hadn't even thought about putting him as a starter, although people were talking about that back in the spring. Jess, what's your take on the future of Tyler Wells?
I'm right there with Eli. I think he's either a starter or a back end of the bullpen guy. He's either an 8th or 9th inning guy if he sticks in the bullpen, and he's a starting pitcher, which is kind of a funny dynamic. He's either one of those two things, right? But no, I mean, he definitely doesn't seem, he's not a stereotypical middle reliever, and it just doesn't make, with his stuff, it doesn't make sense to utilize him in that way. And I think you're not getting the value that you could be getting out of him if you use him as a long man, which he might be capable of. But I just think there are other long men that you can use instead and kind of maximize Wells' value. So that's why I see him either as a starter or back of the an 8th or 9th inning guy. I don't think he's going to be the definitive closer to start the year next year. I think probably we're going to end up having a closer by committee thing. We have a few eligible closers, Tanner Scott, Dylan Tate, that are all vying for it. So I don't think he's going to be named the outright closer and just hold that position throughout the entire year next year. But he definitely seems like a guy that is potentially capable of it, and it's going to take a little more than what he's shown us this year, but it seems like he really has made improvements throughout the course of the year, and it looks like he's going to be an effective bullpen piece.
Yeah, no, I think the starter idea the starter idea is a good one. That's how you probably, to get the most value out of a guy. If he's like a 4.5 ERA guy who's like the number 4 in the rotation, he's probably already going to be worth more than what an Orioles closer would be next year, because they're just not going to get that many opportunities to get saves. You're not going to get like 50 saves next year. So yeah, I think that's an interesting idea. I wouldn't mind seeing that be toyed around with in the spring, and give him a starter too. I kind of like that.
Yeah. And if you have him be a starter at the beginning of the year, you can always move him to the bullpen. That's not a problem. Mm-hmm. You can't put him in the bullpen and then make him be a starter. That's a lot tougher.
Right. Yeah. Also, the Orioles need to get more diverse last names. We've talked about Tyler Wells, Alex Wells, Hunter Harvey, and Matt Harvey. It's too confusing.
It is.
They got to change their names.
Right.
Anyway, stop being selfish, you guys. Change your names, please. All right, another thing we want to talk about is Trey Mancini and the Kyle Farnsworth just debacle that happened online. So Trey Mancini, you know, he had cancer last year, guys. I don't know if anybody had heard about that, but he had cancer, missed all of the 2020 season, has played in most of the Orioles games this year. Despite, you know, not having his best offensive season, clearly has had some struggles. But Kyle Farnsworth, a former bullpen pitcher, so Trey Mancini missed a game, sat out a game, and Brendan Hyde said the reason was just that he had general soreness. And Kyle Farnsworth then tweeted, "So I just saw that an MLB player didn't play today because of general soreness. Are you kidding me? It's September. Everyone is sore. If you can't play through soreness, you shouldn't be playing the sport. SMH." Kyle Farnsworth is shaking his head. Jesse, you sounded like you wanted to jump right in just then.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I just want to say about this is, like, first of all, whenever these managers talk about what is wrong with their players or why they're injured or why they're sitting out, they're always generally somewhat vague about what is really going on. They're not going to give the entire medical diagnosis right in front, on camera, in front of everybody.
Right.
So the fact
and Brandon Hyde doesn't care about the medical diagnosis. He's like, he's sore. He's got the day off. He's relaxing. It's fine, you know?
Right, exactly. So the fact that he just kind of jumps on that, especially about somebody, and it was about Mancini, just so everybody knows.
He said it wasn't, though. He clarified.
He came out and tweeted like a full 27 hours after.
Yeah. But the thing is, like, for him to be judgmental of Mancini and to be like, "Oh no, actually, you should have been playing at that time." Yeah, if he had a hangnail, I'm sure Trey Mancini would have been playing that day. If he had a 1% soreness, I'm sure he would have been playing that day. That is fine. Kyle Farnsworth does not know what condition Trey Mancini is in, and to judge him, you know, and the Orioles indirectly for allowing him to sit out is just absolutely ridiculous. And yeah, I mean, it's I don't even know what the mentality is that kind of like makes you think that. But obviously, all of these guys, you know, need to take a day off here and there, and there's nothing wrong with that. You know, your body generally should not play baseball 162 games a year. I mean, you have to be in incredible shape, and so if he did have some general soreness, even if it wasn't that bad, that's okay to have a day off. It's fine. It's not the end of the world. We're not in a playoff push here. This isn't game 4 of the World Series. Yeah. If it was game 4 of the World Series, okay, maybe it's a little different. It's a team that has under a 33% win percentage this year, and it's September.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say too.
Yeah, go ahead, Eli.
I mean, like, Trey Mancini comes back from literal cancer. He plays 120 games for just the most god-awful team in the major leagues. Although, actually, now the second most god-awful. But, you know, he's a clubhouse leader. He is, you know, he's the face of the Orioles. You know, he puts himself out there. He's available to fans. He's available to media. He's available, like, as a player, as a person, and he's good at all of it. Like, just why is this the guy you're coming after? Right. I just, like, for the life of me, I can't possibly understand it. And when you see people like, even like Marcus Stroman jumping in, you know, saying this is a poo-poo take with, you know, from a guy with a poo-poo career, it's just like the baseball world, you know, knows better. And I partially wrote this on here just to say, I loved to see people rallying around it. Orioles Twitter was popping off. You know, the rest of baseball was popping off. It was great.
Well, and it should be added that, and people mentioned this online multiple times, which was really helpful. Kyle Farnsworth is an idiot. In 2004, he was put on the disabled list because he kicked a fan, not a person, but an electric fan. And this was in late August, and then he was expected to miss at least 3 weeks, according to this USA Today story at the time. So it's late August into September, Kyle, and you're on the Cubs, who I think in 2004 were pretty good. Let me check to make sure that I'm telling that correct. They finished 89 and 73, but you weren't available for your team down the stretch because you kicked an electrical fan because you're a little baby. So
Yeah.
I have no sympathy for Kyle Farnsworth. He deserved all of the hate online that he got. He's a moron, and I'd be happy to never talk about him again personally.
Yeah, I'm cool with that.
Yeah, it's just so frustrating because I mean, these guys get days off all the time. I mean, sometimes nothing is wrong with a player and they get a day off just because they need a day off. If Kyle Farnsworth pitched 2 innings the one day, I guarantee he was unavailable many days for the team the next day. So this is like a routine basic thing that is done to try to keep everybody healthy. So
Well,
right.
Yeah.
And beyond that, Mancini sat out multiple games after the fact because it's a right oblique issue and there is actually something wrong. It's like you said, Jess. I mean, he cued in on this phrase general soreness, and it's ridiculous.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, moving on.
Just wanted to rant. We have a public forum. We did it. It felt good.
One other kind of quick note of on-field stuff. Cedric Mullins is still amazing. He's now hit 27 home runs and stolen 26 bases, and he has a chance to be the first Oriole ever to put together a 30-30 season, which is pretty insane that these Orioles, who are terrible, have legitimately one of the 5 best outfielders in all of baseball. And yeah, I don't know what else to say there. It's just like, I think it can't be overstated what an incredible season Cedric Mullins has had. Like, it gets forgotten about because I think we've talked about it a lot. Made the All-Star team, started the All-Star game. That's all gravy, but like, the season has been incredible.
The thing I really want to just acknowledge about this too is just the mental fortitude that is required for you to just ignore all the rest of the chaos that is happening on the field with the pitching staff, and for you to just take your at bat every single time, every single day, every single game, to not get out of your preparation, to not fall into any sort of laziness, or to not fall into any sort of well, we're terrible and I'm just going to kind of take my foot off the gas. The fact that he remains so focused throughout the entire course of the season and has put up relatively the same numbers, has maintained an OPS over 900 the entire season, is just absolutely incredible for this baseball team. And it really does matter, because it would be a very different situation if he had Giancarlo Stanton hitting behind him, right, in the order, or if he was on a competitive team that was trying to make a playoff push, and you operate off the adrenaline, off winning, and you try, and that's what keeps you focused every day, right? But this is a team that, has so few wins, has been losing consistently, and he's been unbelievably consistent throughout the entire course of the season. And he's going to finish strong, and he's going to put a great season together in the midst of this miserable Orioles team.
Yeah, I mean, he's got an outside chance at the batting average title in the AL, an outside chance at the hits total leader in the AL. Like,
I mean, in a league without Shohei and without Vlad Guerrero Jr., he'd be in the MVP conversation.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know how the voting works exactly, but if they get to vote for like 10 guys, I mean, I could see Mullins getting like a 10th place vote or a 9th place vote. Like, that's not unrealistic. So it's just incredible. Just incredible. Eli, any thoughts on Cedric Mullins?
Yeah, the guy's amazing. We love him. I was looking at this earlier. There was somebody with the St. Louis Browns, not the Baltimore Orioles technically, but same franchise,
right,
in like 1922, who had a 30-30 season. But since they became the Baltimore Orioles, he would be the first.
Been a while.
I just wanted to like give the disclaimer in case somebody wanted to show off online and came and let us know.
I think they used to play in like cow pastures, and like black guys couldn't play on the team back then. Right. So I feel like those don't really count, but I appreciate you for correcting us.
Yeah, I figured it was worth it. But in all seriousness, like Jesse a couple weeks ago before we recorded was like he had proposed the topic that Cedric Mullins was in a slump. And we
Wow,
went and we
Jesse.
looked at the number. And this isn't like to call out Jesse, but we went and looked at the numbers, and he's hitting like 220 over the last 2 weeks, like something like that. And, if you just look at that, the biggest thing, like, we were all in shock. Like, oh gosh, that's not that great. We all came to the conclusion that this wasn't a worthwhile topic, but the only hole that we could poke in a dude's performance over the entire year has been one stretch of like 2 weeks where he hit 220, 240, something like that.
Mhm.
The dude, as Jesse was saying, has been so unbelievably consistent. He's been performing on defense. He's been a power hitter. He's been a contact hitter. He's been drawing walks. He's been stealing bases. He's just been this complete player. And the one thing that Jesse mentioned is for somebody on a playoff team in a playoff race, the other thing you can feed off of is your teammates, right? Not only like is it the protection from a Giancarlo Stanton in the order, it's just like everybody else is energized, so you are too. And like what Mullins is dealing with is a team full of people in a 19-game losing streak, 17 games deep, 2.5 weeks of losing, and he's still able to put himself together, go out there and perform at this incredibly elite level. It's something that does not get as much credit as has already been given to him.
When he had the 20-game hitting streak, I think he went 9 games or so, or at least a bunch of games into the losing streak. If I'm remembering correctly, he went a bunch of the games into the losing streak with his hitting streak.
Right.
So that just kind of shows that, even though they were in the midst of a 10-game losing streak, he still went out there every day and still got a hit, which kind of demonstrates what I think we're saying about him. And that kind of mental fortitude is not to be taken lightly at all. Because he seems totally unaffected by the losing and the poor play.
Yeah, absolutely. Heck of a season that hopefully doesn't get forgotten in all of the terribleness surrounding him on the team.
Right.
A couple other fun notes from Tuesday's game. Melanie Newman was, we talked about this in the show, I guess probably 2 months ago, I think, was it? She was part of the first all-female broadcast, and it was on YouTube TV or on YouTube against the Rays a couple months ago. She did the color commentary that day, or the play-by-play rather. I'm sorry. There was a little girl fan at Camden Yards who had held up a sign about meeting Melanie or asking her if she needed help in the booth, and Melanie ended up getting connected to the fan. They took a picture, and it was really cool, and just kind of another reminder of like how important inclusivity is in these things where, if you can see it, you can be it. And now that Melanie Newman and other women have been in the broadcast booth more consistently, the Orioles have a PA announcer who is a woman, that opens up doors for little girls all over the world that they can kind of dream a little bit bigger than maybe they previously thought they could. So that's huge. And just kind of a cool little moment that, the Orioles and Orioles Twitter kind of made happen. So that was really cool. And then another one, Kevin Brown, I think the same day or maybe the day after that, Michael K. Williams, who played Omar in The Wire, an iconic character, on an Austin Hayes home run. Kevin Brown made a cool home run call where he just said, "You come for the king, you best not miss," which is a famous line of Omar Little's from the show. So that was kind of cool as well. Yeah, guys,
definitely thought those were worth shouting out. They're both super cool moments, and it was in the middle of the 7-3 win. So it was just like a good vibe. That whole night was one of the best nights of Orioles baseball in a long time.
Yeah, I mean, just in general, like the feeling around the team these last couple of weeks has been so much more positive than August. August just felt like such a drudge and not enjoyable at all to watch baseball, and September has been much better so far.
Agreed.
All right, one more thing before we leave. We're going to do the Oriole of the week. Last week's Oriole was Ubaldo Jimenez. He did go to the same college as Eli. I think that's a fun fact. Although he went to college, I think after you, so you were not peers, but still pretty neat. And so what we do here is we give you 3 facts about a current or former Oriole. And then if you would like to get involved, you can just guess sitting there in your car or at work or wherever you listen to the podcast, or you can email us, thewarehousepod@gmail.com, and we'll shout you out on the podcast, or you can DM us on Twitter, Instagram, or I think you can even leave us a note on Facebook, although we're not as active over there. Although Jesse is going to try and change that. Just give us who you think this Oriole is, and we'll give you a shout out on the pod. So the first fact about this week's Oriole of the Week is that they won the AL Cy Young Award in 1980 with the Orioles.
The second fact is that they were a color commentator for the Cubs and White Sox for 20 plus years.
And last, they're a published author of the book Where's Harry, a memoir about Harry Carey.
And Jesse picked out this week's player, and he was a little bit surprised by some of these facts, which is always a fun thing to discover.
For sure.
I proposed we did Ivan on Coffee, but nobody else on the podcast wanted to do that because he only played in like 20 games. So I got
Well, that could have been a future one, Tyler.
Well, maybe we'll bring that up, but we won't mention the 20 game part.
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah.
If we do a player a week and we run this podcast for like 30 years, we're eventually going to run out of players. So Evan on Coffee will have to.
It's true.
Yeah.
A future 2021 Oriole will eventually be on this list.
Oh, wow.
Imagine that. All right, boys. Well, that's about all we've got. As I just kind of mentioned, you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at The Warehouse Pod. You can email us, thewarehousepod@gmail.com, if you have any questions or feedback. What we would really like for you to do is subscribe to the podcast on your preferred podcast app, whether that be Spotify, where you can hit the follow button, or over on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcast. That would be huge. And if you're able to, give us a rating and a review on those podcast apps, and that helps us out a ton, and helps us reach other Orioles fans, which is kind of what this is all about, building a little community. So yeah, that would be awesome if you could do that. Eli, where can people follow you on social?
I'm on Twitter at Elijah Ginsburg.
Nice. And Jesse, how about you?
I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Juggernaut8678, JUGGERNAUT 8678.
I will say though, you shouldn't really be interested in my personal, like I'm a nice guy, I'm fun, but if you want to hear me talk about baseball, I do it almost exclusively from the Warehouse Pod account. And we definitely, like Tyler mentioned, building a community. Even if you don't follow us, get online and join Orioles Twitter. It's a heck of a lot of fun. There's a good community of like pretty hilarious content creators that watch every game, throw tweets around, crack jokes, laugh at our own misery, cry together, all the above. Definitely worth your time.
You gotta get on the ground floor, because this Orioles train is leaving the station here in a year or two, and then it's gonna be too late. Nobody's gonna care about you. You got to get involved now.
There are running lists of people of this person is not invited to the parade. This person's not invited to the parade. So yeah, you get in, you establish your name on the ground floor with the true fans who are suffering through the deepest, darkest depths of this rebuild, and we will all rise together.
Absolutely. All right, next week we will talk about probably a little bit of this Royals series. Then the Orioles have a 4-game series, which includes a doubleheader against the Blue Jays at Camden Yards, and then 3 against the Yankees to wrap up a lengthy homestand. And then I think we'll probably record sometime in there, although that has not been determined just yet. So
I don't think we mentioned specifically that we did win 2 out of 3 in the Bronx against
that was
the Yankees.
Huge.
So we didn't
huge.
really say that, but
You're right.
that was really a big turning point for us, I think, at least in the short term.
It is, yeah, and the Yankees are currently like in shambles. So not that the Orioles really had anything to do with that, but we contributed to it a little bit, I think. So
we made it worse. I mean, I'm sure Aaron Boone was not happy after losing 2 out of 3 to the Orioles. So
especially since last time they were in the Bronx was the Cat game, and then the beginning of the 19-game losing streak. So we exercised some demons there, some feline demons.
Look, if we could play spoiler to our enemies, that's not a bad situation, I think, for the Orioles. At this point.
Shout out Robert Andino.
Yeah, right. Shout out Robert Andino.
Absolutely.
At this point in the season.
So then do you want to get swept by the Blue Jays so that they can like overtake the Yankees?
I mean, I'm not commenting on. No, I don't.
Honestly, the answer is yes.
Really?
Honestly, yeah. If the Blue Jays, I mean, so Jesse and I think we've mentioned this before. Our mother is from Seattle. So if the Mariners want to make a run at it, I would love that more than anything. So like we could theoretically beat the Blue Jays and I would still be happy. But I think the Blue Jays have a better chance at doing something exciting in the playoffs. So I choose the Blue Jays, I think.
I gotta just say, I mean, I love Vladimir Guerrero Jr. I mean, me and everybody else in the country watching baseball right now. But I mean, it's amazing to watch him. I can't get over it. Yeah,
he's lived up to all the hype. I mean, it's one big year, but it's a really big year. I mean, he's not going to win MVP, but like he probably will in the future. So huge stuff. All right, boys. Well, good episode. We talked about a lot of stuff. I think we talked for forever, but we had a lot to get through, so that was good. Yeah. I mean, until next time, this has been the Warehouse Podcast. I'm Tyler.
I'm Jesse.
And I'm Eli.